Hi, welcome to Superhero Rundown. I'm Jess, and today we're looking at the worst people in the galaxy. That's right, we're talking about the greatest of supervillains, the Jedi. Don't at me. Just as a warning, I am only discussing the films, all 9 episodes and Rogue One. Solo doesn't matter because there are no active Force users, and Rogue One does count because Vader and the monk Chirrut, who is a great example of a non-supervillain Force user. Obviously, the Skywalkers figure into a lot of this, but I'm going to be concentrating on the Jedi Order as a whole for the most part. So, the younglings is what we'll start with, because holy crap, do the Jedi basically kidnap them from their homes and brainwash them into obeying the Jedi Council. And to expound on this, in 15 Ways the Jedi Are Bad Guys, Mark Zambrano points out, while some may say becoming a Jedi is every kid's wildest dream, others might point out that this involves removing them from their homes when they are too young to have developed moral reasoning so they can be taught to kill effectively, feel nothing, and look forward to dying so that they can become part of something bigger than themselves. In other words, training child soldiers is never cool. What can I say but yikes? And it doesn't just stop there. Oh no, because the Phantom Menace brings up midichlorians, which is essentially eugenics for those of you playing the home game. Zambrano explains, the lesson here is that unless you're related to someone who has a genetic predisposition to a high midichlorian count in their blood, you're just a worthless muggle like the rest of us and won't be saving the galaxy anytime soon. It's kind of an odd policy for an organization whose charter supposedly promotes harmony. I guess what I'm saying is, the Jedi are space Nazis. But you're like, they fight for peace and harmony and order. Yeah, so did the Nazis, under an Aryan race banner. Just because you say you fight for something doesn't mean you always go about it in the right way. So, brief eugenics lesson. As you can tell by this lovely visual aid, eugenics is bad. Don't do that! Look, eugenics starts with stigma. It's part of the reason why there are people locked in cages at the border in the United States right now. Some idiot decided that these hardworking people were illegal, and it became a slippery slope to concentration camps. And how did the Nazis figure into the Jedi way? Well, you know, Aryan children were forced to join the Hitler Youth. The only real difference here is that humans aren't the only ones who have midichlorians. There are other species, so fuck off, Nazi scum. While positive eugenics had privileged the Aryan ideal, programs of negative eugenics were seen to have arbitrarily stigmatized, sterilized, even murdered categories of populations deemed unfit. Edmund Ramsden remarks in Confronting the Stigma of Eugenics. So, midichlorians are eugenics, and it got to the point in Star Wars that Jedi became so high and mighty of themselves that Mace Windu, a Jedi Council member, basically decided to execute Palpatine in his office because he was a Sith Lord. And he controlled the courts. But here's the thing. Just because the odds are stacked in the Sith Lord's favor, doesn't mean you go hacking his head off. You could, but I don't know, that could be terrible or whatever. Basically, good old Mace feels that a military coup is a far more peaceful transitioning of power than going about the situation with a more moral approach. And then when he's attempting to arrest the Chancellor, he has control of the Senate and the courts. He's too dangerous to be kept alive. Yes, Palpatine may be the leader of an entirely evil and dark entity, but murdering him on the spot is their only and best option? Ryan Epps pointed out in Reasons Why the Jedi Are the Villains in Star Wars. Maybe not murder the guy who is in charge. Like, assassination may be the answer in some situations, but not this one. And the Jedi are more than just full of themselves. Their arrogance has basically propagated a religious cult. Epps goes on. While they may stand for order and justice, claiming to be the protectors of the entire universe, much of their belief system and ways of going about said protection aren't all that morally sound. After all, in contemporary terms, they are a religious cult that abducts children, irrationally sees themselves superior to pretty much anything within the galaxy, and are governed by a council of blind leaders that go about their businesses as if not only above the law, but in the name of order itself. And I mean, at this point, someone in the comments that I'm not going to be reading is going to be like, but the Sith are like evil, and this is a classic battle between good and evil. Yeah, but it's more nuanced than that, you dipshit. Yes, but Anakin, Luke, and Rey all have the same problem. They're emotional. Not just angry, but emotionally volatile, which is not the Jedi way. Elliot Hecht, in his essay The Dark Side of the Force, The Misunderstood Side, explains, everyone lives with emotions. Whether one gives into those emotions, on the other hand, is another story. The Jedi view giving into emotions as evil, and try their best to stay neutral in all aspects of life. One of the lines in the Jedi Code is, there is no emotion, there is peace. The Sith take the opposite approach. They give into their emotions and become strong in the dark side. Sure, sometimes emotions make people do stupid things, but that doesn't make them evil. Giving into emotions is easy. Some people believe that the dark side is easier to master because of this, but it also makes it stronger than the light side of the Force, which promotes turning away from emotions. That's not saying that the Jedi are emotionless, they just don't let their emotions control them or dictate their actions. But when you look at these three specifically, they use both sides of the Force. Luke whacks Vader's hand off in Return of the Jedi because Vader said, I'll turn Leia to the dark side, and Luke was like, nope, and became aggressive in his lightsaber swings. Rey used Force Lightning in Rise of Skywalker, which Luke probably has at one point too. Anakin, besides murdering younglings, also uses aggressive stances against Dooku. Though I will say you can't just blame these individuals for their actions. Anakin was too old to start training according to both Windu and Yoda. And Luke had Yoda for a teacher, but interrupted his training to go deal with the Cloud City problem. Rey was an adult when she started training. Who can you blame, though? The Jedi. In The Force Does Not Belong to the Jedi, Jed Cole tells us, the Jedi of the prequels comprise a bureaucratic, elitist institution with deadly political power and a grand sense of their own necessity, authority, and political wisdom. A misguided sense which Palpatine easily manipulates for his own ends, resulting in the Jedi's destruction. And it's easy to see why. The Jedi kind of disobey the law when it suits them. In Attack of the Clones, Anakin and Obi-Wan steal vehicles, weave in and out of traffic, use weapons in a nightclub, all in pursuit of a would-be assassin of Padme's. It's also not just in the prequels either, because in 15 Reasons Why the Jedi Are Bad Guys, Zambrano points out, even Luke, who was trained outside the Order, has a certain knack for killing innocents and celebrating it afterwards. We'll forego for a second his complete lack of remorse or even hint of pity for the millions he killed on the Death Star. That was, after all, a military target that had just wiped out an entire planet. The same, however, can't be said of Jabba the Hutt's pleasure cruise on Tatooine. On that memorable occasion, Luke merrily murdered an entire barge to save his friends in the most reckless way possible. No doubt, rescuing Carbo Han from Jabba the Hutt was the right move. Destroying a floating boat presumably filled with innocent slaves in the lovable Max Rebo band was not. Leia had just killed Jabba. Han was free. They had won the day and there was no one left to put up a fight. But who cares about any of that when there are explosions to be had? Oh, and let's talk about Windu for a hot second. Despite having no trouble constantly involving themselves in the inner workings of government, the Jedi conveniently ignore the law when it gets in the way of what they want. After Mace Windu learns that Palpatine is secretly a Sith Lord, he takes it upon himself as judge, jury, and executioner to straight up assassinate the elected leader of the galaxy. No warrant, no trial, no verification of the facts, no government authorization. No telling anyone that the Supreme Chancellor is actually an evil space wizard. All that literally goes out the window. Yeah, I mean, he was willing to murder the Supreme Chancellor, and he even says, we have to move quickly if the Jedi Order is to survive. Not that they need to save innocent people, but so they can save the system that is kind of the worst. And in case that wasn't clear, let's talk about Anakin Skywalker. As can be witnessed in the treatment of a still-in-training Anakin Skywalker, not one person of the Jedi High Council accept his opinion or advice, effectively shunning him from even gaining their trust from the start and belittling his and many more young ones' mindsets, explains Ryan Epps in Reasons Why the Jedi Are the Villains in Star Wars. So it's kind of easy to see why Anakin was so taken by Palpatine. He wasn't just seduced to the dark side. The Jedi belittled him and made him feel unwanted. This powerful guy who was supposed to bring balance to the Force, and they kind of fucked him over. I would be pissed too. As Revenge of the Sith, the final film of the prequel trilogy, shows, Palpatine's coup, his seizure of the state through emergency powers, is almost a logical extension of what the Republic always was, at least as we came to meet it in The Phantom Menace. a galactic empire. It's just that the Jedi have served the Republic only insofar as doing so maintains their own dominance as an institution, as we realize when Anakin tells Windu that Palpatine is the Sith Lord. Rather than worrying about the threat this poses for the pseudo-democracy of the Republic, Windu says that they must act quickly if the Jedi Order is to survive. Once Palpatine has an army of clones programmed for absolute loyalty, the Jedi are no longer politically necessary, besides Palpatine's other more evil and less pragmatic concerns for their demise. Which Jed Cole is correct on that. The Jedi are no longer needed, so of course the clones have been programmed to follow Order 66. And when the stigma of being a Jedi is placed on the Jedi, we have an issue, because stigma spoils identity in modern societies. Meaning is imposed upon an attribute via stereotypical images that discredit members of a social category. And Order 66 discredits the Jedi almost instantaneously. Not to mention that the saga has been referenced in other movies, most notoriously in Clerks by Kevin Smith. Clerks is largely set in two small retail outlets. Dante, Brian O'Halloran, argues that he has a responsibility towards his post behind the counter of a convenience store, while Randall, Jeff Anderson, abuses his role at the video rental shop in every way that he can think of. Randall often visits Dante next door, and in one scene they discuss Return of the Jedi. Randall is concerned that the rebels have acted unethically in blowing up the Death Star, because there may have been innocent contract workers on board. Randall's concern for an invisible population of workers draws attention to his own invisible place behind the counter of a retail outlet, part of a drifting population of casual employees in contemporary America. The discussion hinges upon whether these contractors were in some way responsible for their own deaths, whether in taking a job on the Death Star they become a part of the bad politics of the Imperial Empire. Darren Jorgensen explains in Death Star How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Globalization. Which, given the recent events of the global pandemic, I'd say that's right on the money for a lot of reasons. Jorgensen explains further. The term globalization is in this respect synonymous with Americanization, but it is by the former that recent economic history is largely understood. Globalization, after all, not only avoids the particular associations of America, it also holds within itself the dynamism of the image of the artificial planet. That globalization reverberates throughout the galaxy brings it distinct aesthetic advantages over other terms used to describe the total Earth. It brings with it the cadences of a life lived by the unliving, the emergence and dynamism of a poetic image appearing all at once before the mind's eye. So let's shift gears for a moment and talk about Princess Leia. Not only is she a badass, but she proves herself in A New Hope. She trades bars with Tarkin, she leads the rebels, and most importantly, she's not just another pretty face. She could fight with the best of them, and she isn't afraid of getting shot at. In Space Bitches, Witches, and Kick-Ass Princesses, Megen de Bruin-Mole explains. A New Hope arrived in cinemas during what Michelle Citron has described as a larger mainstreaming of feminism. Media fans were confident enough about the movement and its tenets to comment on the feminist potential of the products they were consuming, and Princess Leia inevitably became part of this discussion. In the second issue of the fanzine Alderaan, 1978, one fan wrote, "As a feminist, though I was delighted with Princess Leia, I was disappointed by the dearth of any other major female part, most especially among the pilots of the rebellion." Further, recent critical work has described Leia as the first feminist action hero of a new generation that came to feature outspoken and physically capable characters such as Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor. This characterization is undoubtedly owed in large part to Carrie Fisher, herself an outspoken feminist, who remained vocal about her role as Leia, and the sexism leveled at her and her character until her death in 2016. I lived long enough to see my princess become a general. Suck it, nerds. And going back to The Force Does Not Belong to the Jedi, Leia is brought up in The Empire Strikes Back. In Empire Strikes Back, when Luke recklessly leaves in the middle of training to try to help his friends against Yoda's wishes, Obi-Wan laments that boy was our only hope. Yoda disagrees. No, there is another. We can only assume, as Return of the Jedi reveals, that this is a reference to Leia, Luke's sister. It is only Yoda who sees Leia as having the potential to become a new kind of Jedi. She did. In The Last Jedi, she does end up getting put into a coma because she uses the Force to save herself from dying in the vacuum of space. And some of you are like, but that's not how the Force works! space wizards in space intended for children. The Force works however it needs to. Seriously, look at who's fighting these fights. In the prequels, there are highly trained Jedi who know their shit. In the original trilogy, it's more stiff because Vader is old and so is Obi-Wan. In the case of Luke, I already said, he's easily provoked, taking aggressive stances against Vader when he threatens Leia. In the new trilogy, Kylo Ren is emotional. Rey and Finn have never really held a lightsaber before. It's easy to see why it's a sloppy fight. And yes, I think Finn and Poe and Han are all Force adjacent. Don't at me. In light of the interpretation of The Last Jedi, these 10 films are nothing less than the deconstruction of the Jedi ideology, the unfolding of hope in a movement of resistance that ultimately learns it cannot rely on myths and legends alone, but must rediscover the power of solidarity among the oppressed, the embrace of the interdependence of life and death, light and dark, Jed Cole states in The Force Does Not Belong to the Jedi. Speaking of Rey, opinion shifted again in 2015 with the release of The Force Awakens. In popular discussions, Star Wars feminism was reframed as a progression from Leia, a powerful but solitary role model in the original trilogy, to Rey, who takes up the mantle of Jedi hero that previously belonged exclusively to the male protagonists of the films. This progression was also calculated by the amount of screen time given to female characters and how often they are allowed to speak in the old trilogy as compared to the new. Also, all those people who told me the lead protagonist can't be a woman or a black guy, suck my dick. Okay? These two movies are brilliant. The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. It's just a shame we're never going to learn what happens in the end. But I'll leave you with this. The Force is just a symbol for what binds each of us together. We all breathe the same breath, we all die into the same dust, and we are all entwined in an empire of lies about what our dreams should be, who belongs and who does not, what we are capable of as a society, and the limits of political possibility. We have nothing to lose but our delusions, and everything to gain. Am I a Jedi? No. But I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. I am one with the Force, and the Force...